Welcome to the UNSW Aviation Society's very first podcast, the pilot episode. No pun intended with that either. And today we'll be welcoming three former alumni of UNSW, Ashan, Jessica, and Mook. Joining me today is my co-host, Calvin. How are you going?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, very well.
Yeah, let's dive into it with our three guests. So just introduce yourself, talk about how your journey was at UNSW and how you got to where you are now.
Okay, sweet. I'll go first then. Hey, yeah, I'm Ashan. I graduated end of last year, end of 2019. I did the Bachelor of Commerce and Aviation Management, the double degree. Planes aviation has literally been my life since I was a child, so there's no question about doing this degree. When I ended my first year, I got my first job in aviation. It was my first real job anywhere, which was a cabin cleaner for Qantas.
Oh, no way.
Very, very interesting job that was. I did that for about, I think, 3 months, 4 months. It was fun for the first 2 months, and then I got sick of it.
What was the worst thing you rocked up to? You got stuff everywhere, or was it pretty good?
Look, honestly, the issue with Qantas flights is that we found that their cabin crew don't do active cleaning and collecting trash throughout the flight. So you end up, especially with these long haul flights that come in from LA or Dallas and stuff, they are completely filthy. The American flights were the worst. You'd walk on and it was literally like a trash dump inside the cabin. Quite interesting. Then I was there for a couple of months, and then I left there for Denada, and that was the most fun I've had in a job for the last 3 years, dispatching aircraft and managing boarding procedures for Emirates, and that was insane. And then once that finished up, I ended up in the head office for Denada doing a business analyst role. That was basically my grad role. I did that as soon as I finished university, and that's where I am now.
Oh, interesting. How was Denada as ground handling? Would you say Denada has a lot of opportunities, get a promotion or even head up to head office and like that?
That's the good thing, is that Denada is a huge company. We're part of the Emirates group, of course, and we operate in so many different countries that there's a lot of room for things to progress. When I first started at Denada, I was just a passenger services agent. So it started off literally just pushing wheelchairs, doing boarding assistance for about 4 months. And then only from then, they give you an airline. You can train on an airline and you do check-in. And from there, there are lots of opportunities to keep stepping up and stepping up. So I went from check-in to becoming a gate supervisor. That was within less than a year. It's very easy to progress to a higher level. Did the gate supervisor role for about 9 months, and then I became a turnaround coordinator, a dispatcher. The thing is, in these positions, if you really, really enjoy this job and you have a passion for the industry, it's very, very easy to move up in these roles.
Yep.
The training they give you is incredible as well. So for example, when I became a dispatcher, all the training was done by Emirates. They give you a license and everything in order to handle Emirates aircraft. So you end up with qualifications that you can use even outside of the realm of being with the company. Beyond that, I was actually grateful to do this internship with Denada, which was run through the uni, in fact. And that, I guess one of the reasons I really enjoyed doing that was because I'd always wanted, studying aviation management. The goal was to go and see what the business side of the industry was. I've been working in the operational front line for a couple of years, and I'd always wanted to see how things work on the management side, the business side. And this was a ridiculously incredible opportunity to see it. And following that internship, I still continued to work on the front line for another year. And then because of the internship, I got offered a position in an entry-level role this year when I graduated. And yeah, it's been incredible.
Sounds interesting. What a journey from, as a cabin cleaner, now head office.
Yeah, but honestly, I would not have changed. I would have no regrets doing cabin cleaning. It was incredible. I just wanted to. My dream at that age was I just wanted to hold an ASIC, and that's basically what I managed to do.
It's such a powerful card, trust me. Just having that around your neck is like, you feel like a king. Yeah, we'll head over to Jess. If you want to talk about how you got to where you are now.
Alrighty, so hi everyone, I'm Jessica, and well, my approach was not as simple as it seems. I really had like difficulties in terms of whether I wanted to pursue aviation or not, and some people might have known, but I actually deferred and I came back. So during that time, I really had a good think on whether or not I wanted to approach and keep pursuing aviation. But in the end, I did, and kind of glad I did in the end, because, well, right now where I am, it's not like easy to get to, but it's also not the best, but I still am grateful for what I am able to do. But where I started off was after I graduated from high school, I wanted to do an interesting course, so I picked aviation, and I only did the aviation management degree, and I'm meant to be graduating in like a few days, but because of COVID-19, we don't have a graduation. And besides from that, after that, during my final year, I applied for 3 grad programs, and I was accepted into one, which is the Jetstar grad program, and now I'm a graduate at Jetstar. Then before that, like when I got that opportunity to work for Jetstar, I didn't go immediately because it was like we had like a gap of almost 9 months or something like that. And during that 9 months, I actually got accepted into working with Swissport, and I took that opportunity to use as a operational experience. And I was able to work with Air New Zealand for around 5 months before I moved into working as a graduate.
What are your experience of, like, you know, obviously head office at Jetstar would be in Melbourne, and you started in Sydney. So what did you have to like sacrifice to, you know, to be at Jetstar?
Well, obviously moving interstate, I actually wanted to move interstate to Melbourne back when I was in year 10. So I didn't really have an issue with moving interstate, and it was a kind of a nice experience for me as well to be able to have an excuse to my Asian parents that are like, I have to move out. But in terms of sacrificing stuff, it'll be like really just the social circle, because you have to make new friends down there.
Yeah, no, I'm a very homesick person. So if you asked me to go, you know, Melbourne for like work, I'd have to like travel up to Sydney like almost every weekend. But yeah, it's interesting.
But that's all right, Calvin. That's all right, because in the end you get staff travel and you can come back to Sydney, right?
So, how's the staff travel?
Very true.
That's true. The staff travel is pretty gold.
Yeah, like we're meant to have our 6 months wait before we actually get our staff travel, but because of the situation right now, we've gotten our staff travel within 2 months.
Oh, but it's like, where are you traveling to, honestly?
Yeah, there's no point traveling anywhere besides interstate.
Wait, you get a Qantas as well, right?
Yes, we do. So all the Qantas partners and all One World Alliance. Yeah.
Which airlines do you get? Do you get business class access on Qantas, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Very nice.
Calvin's.
Go for Jetstar.
Very excited.
Mook, did you want to share your story?
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Mook. So for my aviation career, I think to me, I grew up in a small town back in the days in Thailand. So aviation is that's something that I wanted to do since when I was young. So I grew up in a small town in Thailand, like next to the airport. When I was young, get to see planes all the time, you know. Then I moved to Australia in 2009, did all my high school. Then I decided to pick aviation as my career. So to me, I really enjoyed it. You know, I did the 3.5 years aviation management. So I started my aviation career. My first job was a volunteer at the airport. at Sydney Airport. So it's called Sydney Airport Ambassador. So, or another word we know as the Blue Jacket. So this my first volunteer to basically provide airport information to passengers, like check-in information, transport to passengers, like where's the 400 bus to UNSW, for example, or hotels for passengers. Then during my last year at university, I got another role after doing the volunteer with Swissport. So that was the passenger facilitation agent. So this role, I had to provide the passengers, help them with the immigration and coping with their passport, and then managing the busing area, just basically around the terminal. And then after I graduated last year, I got my next role, so check-in agent at Menzies Aviation.
Right. So
that's my current job at the moment. So as a check-in agent.
And how's that going?
Yeah, it's alright. I just started, so it's kind of fun because we just don't do the check-in. We run to the gate, chasing passengers, dealing with their problems, things like that.
So speaking with you, previously, you did do grad dip at UNSW for a little bit.
I did the flying for like a couple of months, because I wanted to be a pilot at first, but then it wasn't really for me towards the end of it. So I think I prefer the management side rather than the flying side. But I got a bit of experience of a bit of, I've done like 3 solo flight, I think, back in the days.
You should have kept going with your RPL and then you could go at least your
Yeah, I know, right? I should have, yeah, that's right.
You're flying weekend. How good's that? And I reckon now's such a good time. You can do a quick touch and go at Sydney and then, or maybe like a full stop, but, taxi back to the runway. I reckon what an experience.
You could do that, yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Let's talk about, obviously COVID-19 hit us quite hard in literally every area in aviation, from our corporates to pilots, and then obviously flight training gets delayed and stuff like that. So what are your guys' takes on on the virus?
It is it's completely unprecedented. The aviation industry in particular has seen things relatively similar before, things like 9/11 and the SARS pandemic earlier, but this is something that is a million times worse than anybody could have imagined. Any of those instances could have extrapolated to. This is something where most of the world's aviation airlines have grounded the majority of their fleets. There is no demand, there is no traffic, and this industry has never seen anything like it. This is the industry. Every industry in the world at the moment is currently affected by this, but nothing is hit harder than airlines and aviation. I think the thing going forward, as things start to recover and things very, very slowly go back to normal, is how aviation is going to look later. I don't think we're going to see anything return anywhere near what it used to be for a very, very, very long time. In particular, low airfares, low cost carriers, mass travel, none of that is going to be realistic for a very, very long time. And it'll be interesting to see how these airlines are going to respond to how things change. It's not just, yes, there'll be soft demand for a long time, but other things to think about is how general restrictions in how we travel going to change. Like, there are all these things at the moment about governments potentially requiring airlines to have social distancing methods on board, and none of these carriers are built to be able to survive by keeping a middle seat free between two passengers, for example. And it'll be interesting to see how many airlines even survive 1 to 2 years down the track.
Do you reckon it'll be different if there was like a vaccination or a cure though, in terms of how fast the aviation industry would because obviously if you know that there's a cure or a vaccine out there, you feel more comfortable traveling, or at least
right, yeah.
So
exactly, yeah. I mean, I think that's good. The vaccine is the thing that's going to basically switch on the rest of the world. Like, once people start to get vaccinated, or a certain critical number of people are vaccinated, then things can, go back to the way they used to be. But what people say in particular is, sure, once, say, the entire globe is vaccinated against this virus, what's going to change is how whether things in our daily life have to change in order to prevent something like this happening again. So looking at what happened after 9/11, how the entire industry completely changed, how we fly, how we do anything changed just because of that incident. And this is something that has caused a huge impact. And the industry might need to adapt to, I guess, prepare for when this happens again, if and when this happens again with something completely different. And that's where the concern comes in, with whether things will have to be done differently, whether there are going to be additional requirements for hygiene and monitoring passengers' health, just as a general rule to prevent the spread of things that happen in the future. That is probably the biggest concern.
And do you see that, Ashan, as something that airlines could see as being viable in terms of considering that the aviation industry relies on people to travel and comes together essentially on aeroplanes? And sure, you can do things to try and enhance hygiene and whatnot. That's something that can definitely happen. But in terms of 100% mitigating it, I don't really think that's possible. Do you see that as something that airlines just have to, or people in general just have to take that risk in order for things to move forward? And then as a sense of normality returns, that will sort of like sort itself out per se? Or do you think it's just something that it's just going to have that much of a profound impact that, like you said, many airlines will struggle to facilitate that?
No, look, I'm a firm believer for a lot of things in the idea of a word one of my high school teachers used to throw around was bounce back ability, and how these companies are going to be built in order to bounce back from this. And yes, eventually demand is going to pick up again, and eventually demand will be where it was before, for sure. It might take some time, but the demand will return to what it was before eventually. The issue is whether the airlines will be able to sustain any new practices that are required. So if airlines are required to, say, have fewer passengers on board an aircraft, or put in additional costs, there are additional cost measures required in order to comply with, say, new health regulations that come into place, that's going to cause quite a shift. So say budget airlines, for example, rely on extremely low operating costs and high density travel, high density travel but low yield.
Yep.
And that is something that will be tricky when there are any restrictions that, say, limit the number of people in a particular space, or if demand is soft. Look, eventually things will go back to somewhere near what they were, but it's just going to take a very, very long time for the industry to recover.
I was just going to ask, how has this virus affected like your roles at the moment?
Well, I guess I'll start off. For me, because the role I was initially put in first was in the customer background role, so we weren't affected at first as much, purely because we had to still help customers recover and refunds and cash vouchers and all that. But after that, we all, like majority of the corporates and all the head office was pretty much stood down until further notice. So a lot of people in all different industries have been affected However, I think aviation industry has taken the frontline hit in this unprecedented situation. Besides that, we're all just waiting for when we can get back to work. And as Ashan said earlier, it wouldn't bounce back completely, but there will be some sort of demand where it's going to start rising back up again, which hopefully it won't be soon, but we'll all wait for that time.
In fact, there may even be one of the other things that people think about is that once restrictions start to ease, whether there'll be a significant, at least temporary, drastic boost in demand as people suddenly go, hey, we can travel again, let's travel, everybody travel.
It'll be a sudden one, but I don't think it'll be quite strong,
Right,
because
yeah.
People have been affected financially as well. So not everyone will have that back cash ready to use to fly.
Right, of course. And then the other thing to say is I don't think airfares are going to be what they were before as well. So whilst people will want to travel, the financial impact of it is going to be quite difficult.
Do you say this impact now, considering that all of you guys all your roles are associated with predominantly international travel. Maybe not so much Jess, but in terms of Ashan and Mook, do you see that,
Yep.
I know, altering your, like, because we all say have goals for 1 to like 3 to 5 year goals that you want to see yourself potentially. Do you see this obviously now affecting that, or do you see yourselves wanting to go into something a little different now? Or are you still hopeful that that everything will eventually recover and you'll still want to pursue this like in a few years' time as well?
I want to say nothing is always like never think it's easy. I would still stand for this like industry and continue to work in this industry even though it's hard. In the times now especially, but in the end you know that you're doing something you enjoy, and I won't see myself in any other industry actually, especially after taking on the grad role and working in like such a culture that I am able to enjoy myself and also see an outcome. So for me, I would continue to work. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think
that's right. Yeah. Oh, you go first.
most of the people listening to this will agree that this is one of the best industries in the world. It's one of the most interesting and dynamic industries in the world, and we all have a passion for working in this industry. This situation is but a speed bump, and it's definitely not going to put us off the industry in general. And I definitely see, it's a volatile industry, but definitely absolutely not put off it at all.
No, awesome. And in terms of then, say for those guys who are coming through now in their first, second, or even third year, what advice would you give them, apart from obviously stay strong and if you love it, stay into it, but what advice would you give them now based off the current events at the moment?
It's a little bit tricky. No, it's a little bit tricky, but
yeah.
Well, take whatever comes first. Yeah, like honestly, like it's gonna be hard when you first start out, especially in such a low demand industry at the moment. But take whatever it is, whether it's not in the industry or whether it is in the industry. Take whatever you can, and just do that in the time being. And if you still have a passion for aviation, you can always go back and try different jobs. You can always start off, like all three of us started off working at the airport as like, either like Ashan doing cleaning for Qantas, Mook doing not men's, she's currently doing
volunteer at the airport.
I also do volunteers and passenger facilitation as well. So even if it's a small role, take that opportunity now, and just it snowballs from there. You can work your way up, and as Ashan said earlier, it's really easy to get upskilled if you have passion for the industry. So if you just continually be persistent and chipping away at this rock, you'll eventually get somewhere and achieve something you want.
Exactly. Yeah. Just, you kind of hit it on the head. You hit the nail on the head there in that, sure, whilst a lot of companies in this industry are going to have a bit of a freeze on recruitment for a little while, you don't, even if everything you want to do is work in this industry, don't get slowed down by that. Take whatever you can get, do things outside of the industry, do something completely different to the industry and get experience elsewhere, and come back when the industry is ready.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect working at a different industry to be related and help you get into the aviation industry, because I came from a retail background, and a lot of the work from my retail background actually somehow feeds into my work that I'm currently on.
Would you recommend students to extend their studies though? Say like pick up an honours or a master's like that?
It's really up to each individual person and however they want to approach it. I know because I've been stood down and I kind of got bored, so I decided to pick up a course online. So it's really important to, I just guess, keep learning and keep picking up information. Just keep on your toes. So if you want to continue studying honours or taking on extra studies, it is good. But if there are other opportunities that are like jobs, because I feel like you learn a lot more from jobs than online or doing an honours or something like that. Sorry, universities.
a lot of people might have considered at the end of their degree, hey, at some point in my life, I want to do honors or I want to do masters. But if things are soft in the industry, if at the end of your degree, if things are still soft in the industry, and if there aren't a lot of opportunities out there, then it might be it's definitely not a bad idea at all to give those things a better consideration. I considered masters at some point. Did not want to do it when I just graduated, but I think in the current circumstances, it is a perfect time to kind of take up something else if that's what things are like.
We've got a little bit more time. I just out of curiosity. So obviously, like Virgin Australia is going into voluntary admission. Do you reckon the government should help them or no?
Yes and no for me. It depends, but yeah.
The last time this debate came up was a few years ago when Qantas was really, really struggling. And they asked, I think it was the then Abbott government for support. And they were pretty much shot down straight away. One of the biggest things, of course, about Virgin in particular is that they're significantly foreign owned by SQ and Etihad and the H&A group, which is why the government, it is a very, very tricky area. Yes, they provide a lot to this economy, and a monopoly, a full service carrier monopoly in this country would not be good at all.
No.
But the government has never been one in this country. The government has never been one to subsidize our flag carriers much at all. And to be honest, I don't think it is necessary. I think there can be sufficient funds raised from private investors. There's a lot going on that front, and it perhaps is not a very fair game, not very fair game for the government to go and bail out the carrier.
But wouldn't that create like a monopoly though? Because everyone's like, well, people in the industry are worried about Qantas being a monopoly, and then other people who don't know aviation is saying, oh, why should our tax money go towards a foreign-owned company? So how big of an impact would it be if Qantas, take over the domestic market?
What do you think, Jess, as a Jetstar representative, if it was just Qantas and Jetstar hanging around?
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to say anything. I didn't mind that. I was like, oh no, don't put me in this fight. Well, look, I agree with Ashan that the government shouldn't really bail out Virgin because it is foreign owned, yes, but also in the airline, like in aviation industry, never has there been in Australia that the government has bailed out any of our airlines. Like if that happened, ANZAC wouldn't be where they are now. Like ANZAC maybe could have survived. You never know. So if Virgin has to go through the same process, and now that there are more foreign interests in this airline, I'm pretty sure they will, you'll be foreign owned, but they will be able to survive. But the question is, in Australia, there's always been the two airline policy. So that's also quite confusing as whether or not it's going to be foreign owned or Australian owned.
We need two airlines, guys.
Yeah,
we can't have one.
I wouldn't mind if there was just one monopoly, but
everyone's gonna, yeah.
I reckon it's time for Rex to expand into jetliners.
Oh yeah.
Very aging fleet, Rex.
Very aging fleet, yeah.
I don't know, just in terms of Virgin though, I think also one of the reasons why the government's quite reluctant to subsidise them is because they've always had, well not always, for the last few years now, they've had these underlying financial issues anyway, which have obviously been compounded by the coronavirus, and there's no doubt about that. But obviously, I don't think they want to subsidise an airline that has, an organisational or a structure or financial structure that has them liable to failing again if something like this happening. So I think what they want them to do is just be like, okay, we will potentially subsidise you in the future if you restructure and make your business model more viable, and with more redundancies in there to ensure that you can survive something like this in the future. But not if it's something like this, but you're just more self-sufficient in terms of their financial capabilities as well. So I think that's also one of the reasons why the government was like, okay, we will help you out, but just sort your finances out first, or sort out your structure to ensure that that in the future that you're not essentially losing all this money and whatnot. So that means if something like this happens again, they're not in such a position as they are now.
Right. Yeah. Look, that's a very good point. Actually, is that you're right. Virgin has not made a profit in a long time, and that's due to their own managerial decisions and how they've decided to structure the company. And that yes, coronavirus has pushed the airline over the edge, but you're right. It's compounded by years of how the airline has operated and years of losses, and coming now and asking for a government bailout is basically just trying to patch up the wounds that were caused earlier. And it just does not seem fair or level to be doing that when it is management and structural issues that have caused the root of the issue.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I think the situation with Virgin will eventually pick up again, and I think we will still have 2 airlines operating in Australia, which ultimately is beneficial for everyone.
Of course, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for. But yeah, thanks all of you guys for joining our first podcast. Thank you, Ashan, Jess, and Mook.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Guys, stay tuned on our next podcast, which is I believe it's on flying. So for pilots out there, be sure to listen and don't forget to wash your hands.